All right. Hello, everyone. And welcome to Working Masses DSA National Political Committee Candidate Labor Forum. We've got a great program for you tonight. We have 9 of the 40 candidates running for the 16 seats on the NPC, representing a variety of the prominent political caucuses within DSA. In just a moment, we'll introduce the candidates. As many DSA members are even unaware that National Political Committee is the highest political executive body within DSA between conventions. DSA is the largest socialist organization in the United States with 92,000 members. The NPC guides and leads the implementation of DSA's major political and organizational goals, which are broadly defined every 2 years by the delegates to the National Convention. They instruct the national staff, currently consisting of 22 employees, on how to carry out DSA's day-to-day work and create task forces and committees to guide specific areas of DSA's political work. The NPC elects a 5-person steering committee and 2 national co-chairs. The NPC is elected at the National Convention, which will take place this year from August 8th to August 10th in Chicago. Organized labor, organizing the unorganized, organizing the multiracial and transnational working class and poor is our focus tonight. As a historical materialist and scientific analysis of our society reveals that the exploitative relationship between the ruling and working classes is the central feature of capitalism. And organizing the working class to flex our power to strike is central to freeing society from capitalism and extreme inequality. Working Mass is a labor and working class news and media outlet based in Massachusetts with contributions from union members and members of Boston, Worcester, and Cape Cod DSA. Working Mass would not be possible without financial support from individual subscriptions. If you enjoy Working Mass and believe we need to compete and surpass the corporate media, please consider pitching in $5 a month to help us grow. You'll get a print edition of Working Mass bi-monthly in your mailbox. Follow us, like, and share on Instagram, X, Facebook, or Blue Sky. Tonight, I'm your host, Dan Albright, along with Ezra running the switchboard, Chris is sharing slides, and Travis Wayne is co-facilitating.
So tonight we have 9 of the 40 candidates vying for 16 NPC seats. We should note that several other candidates from the caucuses representing here later RSVP'd, but to avoid an imbalance between the major caucuses, since caucus NPC members tend to vote as a block together, we sought to secure one candidate from each of the declared caucuses. Candidates from the Socialist Majority Caucus did not respond to our invitation. Starting with Adithya with Red Star from Madison, Wisconsin area DSA, is a former co-chair of Madison area DSA. She led the revival of a tribal chapter, turning it into one of 2024's fastest growing DSA chapters. She also previously helped lead new organizing efforts at a large Wisconsin tech company. David J. with Libertarian Socialist Caucus is from New York City. David has served in leadership for the Racial Justice Working Group, Defund NYPD campaign, on the founding organizing committee of the Flatbush branch of NYC DSA, and in his tenant union.
Cerena E., representing Bread and Roses, is from Houston DSA. Cerena is a union nurse in Houston and co-chair of Houston DSA's Labor Working Group. In 2018, she joined DSA in Austin with a commitment to organizing across Texas YDSA chapters. She's a proud YDSA alum. Cliff C., representing Marxist Unity Group, is currently in Orlando DSA, joined DSA in 2017, and has belonged to 5 different chapters over the years. He's organized tenant and labor unions, electoral canvases, mutual aid, and more, looking to represent the red state chapters on the NPC. And Sarah M., with Reform and Revolution from Portland, Oregon. Sarah is a communications co-chair for National DSA, a union letter carrier, NALC Branch 82. She is active in a reform caucus, building a fighting NALC. Previously, Sarah served on the steering committee of Portland DSA and as a co-chair of the Trans Rights and Bodily Autonomy Campaign Committee.
We'll pass over to Alejandra, who's here representing the Groundwork slate.
My name is Alejandra. She, her pronouns also go by Alex. I am a rank and file member of Workers United. My coworkers and I have unionized 3 different workplaces, nonprofits. I was part of the organizing committee, the bargaining committee, and I'm currently on the Joint Labor Management Committee as well. I'm in the Los Angeles chapter, and I'm happy to be here.
Joshua R., who's Uncaucused from North New Jersey chapter, current co-chair of the DSA National Growth and Development Committee, organizing his workplace with IATSE, and has also organized in tenant and international organizing. Abdullah F. Was the last edition on our tonight's program, is Uncaucused, one of the co-authors of the Carnation program, and sits on the National Labor Commission Steering Committee, wherein they helped launch the Labor for an Arms Embargo campaign, helped lead a successful ballot measure campaign for rent control in Pasadena, and initiated a successful unionization campaign at their workplace with the UAW. Andrew T., representing Springs of Revolution, from Denver DSA. Andrew is a chapter leader in Denver DSA and founding member of the Colorado Palestine Coalition. Has also been involved in the anti-war movement as well as in labor, including the successful campaign for the city and county of Denver workers' right to collectively bargain.
Our format tonight will allow each candidate 90 seconds to speak for each of our main 4 discussion questions.
First question, well, acknowledging the fact that a lot of us are rooted in DSA chapters around the country, but all electrified by the win in NYC of Zoran Mamdani for the Democratic candidacy for mayor of New York City, how do struggles for labor and electoral power inform one another? How should we think of them in relation to each other? DSA Convention 2025 calls for a decade of party building. What does that mean for labor? We'll start with Joshua R. on this one. Joshua?
Hey, comrades. So from how I see it, in order to build out any independent party structures, it's going to require us to build a cohesive political vision with a special focus on our relationship to labor. Labor as a movement should be a place where we not only take in workers and help them provide for their futures, which it does, but it should also be a place where we organize the rank and file and help them build a similar political vision, both personally as well as furthering that vision in their own union leadership and structures. At Labor Notes in 2024, actually, someone mentioned they had formed a conservative caucus in their union, a group advocating for pro-labor candidates with conservative values. Exactly the opposite of what we're looking for. That closes the spectrum of how labor relates to electeds, and instead of organizing its members, it works to narrow labor's views to only those that ignore the hypocrisy of such contradictions, since conservative values almost always create a more unfavorable situation to labor. This must be a place that teaches about what it means to be part of a wider movement, about the intersectionality of our demands, and about how policy and policymakers shape that environment for labor. We should be organizing labor to expand the demands of workers beyond their workplaces and to the whole of society. And for our vision to win among the working class like that, we need to demonstrate that our demands are not only achievable or viable, that they are correct. That means proving not only can we win, that we can do it in a way that's accountable to and shaped by the workers it represents. We must use our electeds to popularize and propel the exact same political vision we are organizing towards in our unions. And it also means showing that our electeds are responsive only to the demands of our democratic decision-making bodies, to our party, and that the workers are that party. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Sarah.
Thank you so much, comrades, for having me here today. Well, I think that the ruling class has systematically splintered apart electoral organizing and the organized working class. This has left our class paralyzed and voiceless. We don't have representation in politics. When we do, our representatives are isolated and surrounded. The result is that the working class has been increasingly disempowered in the American political system. Socialists must organize workers, help them coordinate, and help bring them proudly into electoral work. In office, socialist candidates must relentlessly fight for workers, using all of their leverage and power to defend workers, support strikes, and organize people into unions. Only by combining the power of socialist tribunes and the organized working class can we implement the transformative demands that can help shatter the power of the capitalist class. When we get into office, the only leverage we will have as socialists is the backing of the organized working class. In DSA, our labor organizing and our electoral organizing are too often divided. This is why we need a strong unifying program to help us fight for the same basic ideas in our labor work and in our electoral work. Reform and Revolution and MUG have worked together to draft a program that would do just this, the sort of program that you could bring to your coworkers on the shop floor or use to talk to voters while you're out canvassing for a candidate, grounding DSA in a shared socialist horizon of power, a thing that can unify all of our struggles as we fight to build a workers' party with a socialist program. The struggle for such a party will be uneven. We will have to organize with our bases in radical reform caucuses, but we need to utilize our organizing in electoral arena to catalyze the consciousness of the working class and help them step forward so that we can synthesize these two struggles into a shared mass movement to implement socialist policies.
Thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, for many people, the first step towards socialism is realizing that democracy as a principle should extend beyond electoral politics and into our workplaces. This much bigger step for some is the merger of these social forces into a party that will totally remake society. But because of the hollowing out of the middle class over decades by business, enabled by both the Republicans and the Democrats, union members have become increasingly cynical about the impact of their electoral involvement, while workers often don't even see the benefit of joining or organizing a union. And while unions might occasionally endorse candidates, often at the behest of union bureaucracy against rank and file interests, when they simply adopt a program of electoral mobilization under current conditions in the US, unions can exhaust organizers while failing to secure even economic gains, or worse, upholding nationalist and chauvinist interests of the so-called American working class. But connecting the labor movement to a larger revolutionary project rests at the core of our long-term efforts. As libertarian socialists, we believe workplaces should be organized according to the same directly democratic principles we advocate elsewhere. We aim to repoliticize the labor movement towards a true force for working class autonomy and independent economic and political power. Before and beyond the party, the development and sustaining of independent class organization to assess and address material community needs will be central to our success. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Cliff.
The one task I want DSA members to focus on in their union work is the merger of socialism and the labor movement. You may hear an argument tonight that we just need to focus on winning better contracts, higher wages, safer working conditions, and after we achieve all this, then we can talk about socialism. That argument is wrong. Imagine for a moment we all openly identified as socialists in our labor work and consistently tied the demands we fight for on the shop floor to the demands in DSA's platform. Would this rub some coworkers who are politically backward for now the wrong way? Sure. Could it delay the success of our workplace organizing in the immediate term? It could. In the long term, however, if maintained consistently over a period of years, it will convince the workers that the socialists are the only political force who consistently fight for their humanity to be recognized. Not just bread and butter issues, but for genuine democracy at every level of society, including the workplace. We should not be scared to make political interventions in our unions. We should be proud to oppose Sean O'Brien's Trump appeasement and Sean Fain's genocide endorsements. It is our job to build international working class solidarity in the labor movement, and there are no shortcuts to this work. We build the party by openly rallying people to our politics everywhere that we go.
Thank you. We have Cerena next.
So it's one thing to elect someone with good ideas and a willingness to make allies with progressive leaders and other progressive organizations. And it's also another thing to elect socialists whose leadership emerges from and is accountable to mass organization. Central to our work in party building, our electoral strategy should prioritize the latter. And this is not just for the sake of accountability to a platform, but it is because mass organization, namely DSA and our unions, that is the engine behind building majorities for reforms and defending our candidates. For example, DSA members in New York City joined others in their unions and workplaces, often through pre-existing networks, in part to successfully organize to endorse Soron in DC 37 and UAW, and prevent a Cuomo endorsement in UFT. Also, we should think of democracy as muscle to build and not just as a set of rules that need to be in place. The work of building democracy on the shop floor and in our unions, bringing masses into the political class struggle, is foundational to defending democracy in the electoral arena. And while I agree that it's urgent that we merge the socialists and labor movements, this politicization cannot be done without building the trust of our coworkers and our fellow union members. And a lot of that will require us to not just be political leaders, but also leaders in our workplaces, people, job stewards who know our contracts back and forth. And first and foremost, being coworkers that our coworkers can rely on.
You're coming up to time here, Cerena. Thank you. All right, next we have Andrew with Springs Road.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Our movement of radically transforming our societal structures to be run by and for the workers of the world will always require that labor remains at the core of our organizing. Though in the United States, labor unions are not inherently radical or socialist orientation, labor power is inseparable from building the movement for socialism in the United States. Our campaigns and actions will always be more successful with the backing of workers from our community, and without labor militancy, we'll be doomed to fail. Elections, however, serve as a public avenue to agitate around class struggle, to raise class consciousness among voters and counter against liberal hegemony. Our organizing work should continue towards the goal of coordinated mass strikes and focus on messaging the necessity of solidarity through and within our unions, through our labor leaders and candidates that are committed wholeheartedly to class struggle, while also highlighting the allegiances of the capitalist parties of the Democrats and Republicans. Springs of Revolution's resolution to build a united front towards 2028 does just this by seeking to build coalitions amongst community organizations that understand the needs and desires of the people they represent, as well as labor organizations and other socialist parties here and internationally to build socialism in the United States within our lifetime.
Thank you. Next we have Alejandra.
Hi. So first I want to say that what was happening in New York is something that here in Los Angeles, by having our focus, one of our chairs just went on LA Times and was talking about this, that, like, are we going to have, a socialist mayor here in or DSA backed mayor in Los Angeles? And then our co-chair Mark was letting the reporter know that our focus right now is building up our city council members and ensuring that they are pro-worker, pro-labor, and also DSA members. And in fact, we have a few in our city council that are. Another thing that I want to say is my involvement with DSA was through the radicalization of unionizing my workplace with my coworkers the second time. And it was in that space of having those connections with my coworkers and then understanding as a worker that we are being screwed over constantly by the boss and by the capitalists that made me want to get more involved in DSA, because there was also limitations within our union, right? And there was also a lot of poly ed that I also needed to learn. So I think when we talk about the electoral work and labor, one of the things that we can do, especially as DSA, is increase our membership and educate our membership. Make sure, first of all, that all of us that are rank and file do unionize and are actively involved in our unions and also are pushing our unions to be more socialist. Therefore, we have the power to think about this in a local manner, which we are doing in Los Angeles, to make sure that they are saying something and stepping up when it comes to, for example, the ICE raids that are happening in our city, on top of ensuring that they're going to put a freeze on, on rents, or ensuring that they're backing the things that we are calling for. So that's one of the things that we talk about, building power and that relation between labor and electoral work. Of course, we don't want to, unions. I worked at the California Labor Federation for a while, and that's like the focus is only electoral. And that's obviously not what we want to do as socialists, but there is a component that demonstrates the power and the importance to it. We're seeing that in New York, and we're seeing that in LA, and we're seeing it all over the country as well. So one of the things that we can do is make sure that we're unionizing. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We have Adithya next.
Hey everyone, Adithya here from Madison, Wisconsin. I'll just talk a little about our local labor movement. We're slowly recohering more than a decade after the passage of Act 10, which gutted public sector unions in the very state where they first won recognition. Some of those provisions might get overturned in the courts, but I think the limits of contract unionism are really visible here. UW-Madison has at least 4 different unions that aren't certified, including 2 Ask Me locals, one that finally merged with the other after several years. Our Democratic governor stepped in at the 11th hour a few years ago to stop public sector nurses from going on strike, and with SEIU leadership, encouraged them instead go through the courts to win union recognition. Last week, our Democratic majority state court ruled unanimously that they didn't have the right to collectively bargain after unions threw their weight behind the most expensive state Supreme Court rates in history. When I was organizing at my previous job, one of the largest employers in Madison, our local AFL affiliate backed off on supporting organizing after our CEO threatened the building trades that are also part of that federation. This is all to say that we need to bring socialist politics to the forefront of our labor organizing, maintain a partyist horizon, keep pushing beyond the NLRB framework, and really center new organizing as the lifeblood of our struggle. I think our electoral programs in DSA, obviously have questions resolve around reformist approaches, but increasingly we've seen successes from branding things as DSA projects and really taking credit for that. And we should seek to do so more with labor, both with EWOC and other projects where we can. I think we should also center a socialist party as a
Thank you so much.
rather than a labor party. Thanks.
All right. And lastly, we have Abdullah.
Hey, I'm Abdullah. I'm a DSA member, not Uncaucused. I recently co-wrote amendments on this specific subject, which you can find on Twitter if you go to Carnation DSA. And I think it's really, really important for us to think about labor and electoral power not as separate realms of struggle, but as the same struggle, right? Unions today spend hundreds of millions of dollars on supporting candidates. And in large part, unions rely on politics because of our weak collective bargaining regime and a labor movement that's been progressively defanged through decades of attacks on labor rights. So the labor movement today builds its power in large part by building this electoral power. But as some have already mentioned, that electoral power isn't necessarily progressive, as often unions choose to back candidates that'll only narrowly support the demands of labor. And sometimes they're forced to back candidates that are terrible to avoid an even worse outcome for their members, as we saw last year when progressive unions that had taken a stand for an arms embargo supported the genocidal war criminal Kamala Harris. So our job as socialists is to assist the labor movement in building electoral power that mutually advances the interests of the labor movement and the socialist movement. And there are really great examples of this in DSA today. The People's Transit Alliance in the East Bay brings together riders and drivers around shared demands and has enabled successful fights for hazard pay and expanded service. This allows DSA members to strengthen the bargaining position of the union at the table, while at the same time advancing demands related to bringing down the cost of living with affordable, expansive, and safe public transit. We have to be able to do this at scale. In order for us to do that, we have to be able to take a non-sectarian approach to unions, regardless of their character, their political character, and to organize around a minimal set of agreed upon demands that advance the socialist and the labor movement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. that concludes for that first standard question. We will move to the next one. The next question will be presented by Dan. I will put the list of the names in the randomized order in which they were just selected.
Cool, thank you. And Abdullah, sorry, did you say I think we introduced you as uncaucused, but did you say that you're not uncaucused? And did you want to clarify that?
Sorry, I was making a rhetorical point that I'm a DSA member.
Oh,
First.
sorry. Okay, I see what you did. Okay, so the next question is on like immigration and national border issues, solidarity across borders. So documentation status has become a primary line of division and exploitation among the international working class, but particularly under the Trump administration. How can we organize as both labor unions and the DSA to fight for immigrant justice, for unions to stand up more strongly against Trump, and to organize across nationality, documentation status, and language differences? There's a lot in that question, so if you want to, address which part of it speaks to you or feels the most urgent, we will start with David.
Yeah, so our strategy for overcoming repression will rely on the self-organization, formal labor unions, and militant strategies already adopted in response to, for example, the genocide in Gaza or against ICE and the administration's concentration camp plan. Supporting public sector workers organizing to prevent the worst abuses of the administration, as well as workers within key industries that can put the brakes on imperial and domestic domination, will be critical in the days ahead. We can advance in the near term if we can articulate both a moral and deeply strategic case for standing up and developing cohesive organization from below and in our communities. This can look like our ongoing successes building the Emergency Worker Organizing Committee and Workers Organizing Workers trainings, as well as within our rank and file strategy to empower our unions to stand up for our undocumented coworkers and refuse compliance with the Trump administration. Within DSA, resolutions like R26, Fight Fascist State Repression and ICE, R46, Labor for an Arms Embargo, as well as R32 towards a multilingual DSA, will help us concretely prepare as an organization to demonstrate on-the-ground solidarity and work across nationality, documentation status, and language differences. Our response must take, among other things, the form of intervention and community protection as part of sustaining and building a fighting working class that can win. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yes, thank you. I think that the exploitation of immigrant workers plays a pivotal role in creating the whole uneven, unequal, cruel American capitalist system. I wish I had more time to comprehensively deal with this question, but to keep it simple, labor unions have a vital role to play in defending immigrants. We can fund legal defense funds, provide member services to people who cannot access state support, organize rallies and protests. Unfortunately, right now, many unions fall into the nationalist, chauvinist trap of America First politics. Socialists need to push back on these ideas at all costs. I remember in Portland watching workers at the Nabisco picket line begin to question their nationalistic, all our jobs are going to Mexico ideas in real time as they saw Nabisco workers from Venezuela reach out to them and offer solidarity. As socialists, building coordinated international solidarity is a vital part of pushing back against chauvinistic nationalism and building a base for popular support of immigrant workers. To give an example of some of the work we can do, in my local union, we recently passed a resolution calling for, among other things, contract language that mandates notification of any immigrant services on the work site, bans discrimination for workers correcting immigration documents, and guarantees days off and protections for workers to take days off to conduct immigrant services like becoming naturalized. I think fighting for things like that is one of the ways reform caucuses can push to protect immigrant workers in our day-to-day work.
Thank you. Cerena? Thank you. Cerena? Thank you. 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 Thank
tactics that I want to recognize that DSA chapters are already doing include know your rights trainings and street actions opposing deportation and punishing bosses for supporting deportation efforts. I want to also highlight the boycott campaign, which is an incredible example for how DSA and labor can come together to confront profiteers of the deportation machine. And here in areas and also in other parts of the US, there are union teachers that are also using their school networks to distribute know your rights cards in the balcony programs. And highlights of the logo here in Houston, which is the Avello headquarters. Labor leadership's slow and tepid response to deportation is in fact a byproduct of its support for Mayor John Whitmire, who is currently allowing ICE to collaborate with HPD in deportation. Under Whitmire, this has led to traffic stops where people are detained, and most recently, a woman who was reporting domestic abuse was detained by ICE. In order to address this, our work engaging rank and file members in class struggle on the shop floor, creating the conditions necessary for social ideas to arise, and put aside the bad experience is necessary for building an aspect capable of halting deportation.
Okay, Alejandra.
Yeah, awesome. I'm actually going to share an article that I wrote for Jacobin about this. And one, I also want to state that my grandpa came to the United States as a bracero, and the first thing he told my dad when you come back to the U.S. is like, get yourself a union job, because then my grandpa ended up becoming a steel worker. He was working at a steel mill in Chicago, and that's the first thing that my dad did. He's a custodian, member of CSEA. So anyways, I bring this up because the understanding of struggle and class struggle as being an immigrant, it's something that's very much understood, especially here with justice for janitors that was happening back in the 2000s and the 90s in Los Angeles, and especially it's happening right now. I was actually also had the opportunity to go with SEIU 721, one of the locals here, because they were starting the Justice for Journey tour, to literally go across the South and meet the first stop is in Louisiana, to meet ICE detentions. And a lot of the work that is happening right now, I'm also part of the immigration working group within DSA, where we are connected to the Los Angeles Rapid Response. And it's like the amounts of support, like I'm sure if you guys are reading and like listening to like all the chaos that's happening in LA, it's making it sound like it's like, super mayhem or like it's, Gotham City or something, but it's honestly filled with love and solidarity right now for the immigrant community, for our immigrant community. And it's incredible. And to the point where now unions, for the work that I do, unions are now hitting us up and being like, can you do these business know your rights for us? Because now we want to make sure that our staff is ready to do this in different locations. We did this in Placita Olvera and downtown. So those staff unions are like organizers are ready to go and already started doing it. We're seeing it happening in all other places, and we'll continue to do that work, to work really closely with labor unions, because right here in LA, the understanding that if you're going up against if you're going after immigrants, you're 100% going after labor, and we have to make sure that we're having that and be understood nationally. And of course, it's going to be an issue, but that's why it's going to be difficult. But that's one of the things that we can use social media, we can use digital strategy and comms as a way for people to see themselves reflected in the same struggle, in order for us to continue to build that power, the working class power that definitely includes and centers the most marginalized. And definitely in this moment, we have to be including immigrant workers. So I definitely think that what we're doing in Los Angeles is a great example of that. We even partnered up with different unions and organizations,
You can
nonprofits.
start to wrap it up. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. Cliff.
Our ruling class has always used deportation as a tool to discipline the working class. With its roots in so-called Indian removal and its use documented for centuries, there's three principles that deportation campaigns always follow. It's always racialized, it always targets union organizers, and it always targets citizens eventually. Right now, they are building a concentration camp in the Everglades. People are going to die there. Most of them will be Black and brown folks. Many will be union organizers, especially those organizing agricultural workers in strong union towns like Immokalee. Many of them will be people that have lived here for decades. Some will be citizens, but none will get due process. And when that model proves itself in Florida, it's going to be exported across the country. It is absolutely shameful and self-defeating that our labor leaders are cheering on Trump's deportation and tariff regime. And DSA needs to get serious about organizing opposition to these fascist collaborators in our unions. We should be making a political intervention in every union where DSA members are present to formally oppose Trump's entire economic agenda. The immigrant rights resolution adopted by the United Electrical Workers Union at their 2023 convention is a great model, complete with demands for Congress, contract language forbidding cooperation with ICE, and New Year rights training organized by the union. And finally, I'd like to see Resolution 19 passed at this year's DSA convention to help push us in that same direction.
Thank you. And Abdullah?
I'm a proud UAW 2478 member, and in addition to that, in my experience in running a rent control campaign, I've learned some really important lessons. I think one of the key lessons is to build strong structures in our organizations that are capable of engaging masses of people to take action. Our union has a lot of international workers, and our union leadership prioritized developing international worker leaders who were trusted by their coworkers and had the confidence to organize within their networks. I'll never forget hearing really brave international workers during our mass membership meeting, in which a third of our bargaining unit participated, sharing why their story of injustice made them want to organize. Instead of patronizing international workers as being too vulnerable, our union leadership intentionally built up the confidence of these workers to stand up for themselves, making them effective at moving hundreds of their coworkers to take action. The second is to prioritize fighting, again, for a minimal set of demands that can unite working people in solidarity across nationality and documentation status. As a leader of the Measure Age campaign in Pasadena, which won rent control and tenant protections through a ballot measure, I saw the ways that the brutal cost of living crisis affected immigrants disproportionately. And I also saw that the demand for rent control was powerful enough to motivate many workers with precarious immigration status to take action. I'll never forget one of our top 10 signature gatherers who joined our campaign after our tenant union helped her win against a landlord who was exploiting her and other undocumented tenants. She overcame language barriers and her precarious documentation status to fight for a demand that she cared about, and did so alongside hundreds of other organizers from across the working class.
Thank you. And Adithya?
Yeah, I think labor solidarity historically in the U.S. has been a shortcoming of business unionism, both with our two-tiered labor in the U.S. And internationally. I think this also reflects the shortcomings of the depoliticized strategy of some reform caucuses, especially Teamsters for Democratic Union, and the rank and file strategy is currently implemented. Conversely, I think UAW has previously noted, during the auto strikes in 2023, the need to unionize supply chain in Mexico as well, but also have voiced support for tariffs more recently. I think this is, like with many issues, Trump has helped expose these contradictions and given us opportunities to more clearly show the force of capital at work behind this. Immigrant workers, both those on work visas like Mahmoud Khalil and our undocumented comrades, are clearly being targeted to impose both political and economic discipline on the working class. To that extent, we can't treat immigrants' rights as an auxiliary campaign. This has to be at the heart of our struggles as a working class. And within the labor movement, I think we have to center merging efforts with immigrant organizing to unite and empower the entire working class. DSA in particular should get more involved with labor work outside the NLRA context, continuing to build long-term relationships with immigrant rights organizations, migrant centers, and also seek to identify where leadership already exists and use our socialist politics to build up and develop our fellow comrades.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Josh.
Hey, comrades. So in both DSA and in labor, I think we should work to organize and occupy the front lines of the fight against ICE, the far right, Trump, etc. As members of DSA, it's our job to organize solidarity between our fellow workers. So while many unions support and protect the rights of immigrants, I think it's fair to say, as Comrade Sarah pointed out, that a non-insignificant amount of working people and unions see immigrants as a threat to their employment. It's our job to seriously address this among the workforce and unapologetically take a stand against the further mistreatment of immigrants on the shop floor, in our communities, and in our existing union structures. We have to fight back in a proactive way and push for the expansion of the rights of immigrants in the face of renewed attacks. And by building forward in this way, we can begin to inspire other workers to stand firm. We see workers supported politicians like Zoran standing firm and taking a strong stance against ICE and winning big in heavily Trump-favored communities. That includes putting more effort into organizing immigrants and bringing them into the labor movement by showing them that they aren't alone in this fight, that we're going to stand there with them, and so will their other fellow workers. We should be working actively to make sure that when we are at the point that workers associate the labor movement with improved conditions for all, that the word all includes immigrants. I think the best weapon we can hand to our union members and our unions is to connect them along the lines of this fight and build towards a better alternative together. For DSA, that means building lines of communication between shop stewards, not just those in the same unions also, and bringing those connections into the rank and file. By showing workers that other workers and worker organizations will fight, we can inspire the fight in others, especially if we can show them a clear political alternative and fellow fighters in DSA. I think that, combined with intentional organizing around these issues on the shop floor directly, can begin to reshape the political landscape of the country, including and especially in areas where workers heavily view immigrants as a threat to their employment, as I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
And Andrew.
I think just like first off, I'd really like to say that I think American workers, especially in unions, have a lot to learn from immigrant workers. I see a lot more militancy in the places that I have worked in unions. Immigrant workers have had so much more militancy than just other normal white workers. Really good examples of that is like our independent drivers union out here in Colorado, which is predominantly African immigrants that organize. They are probably one of the most militant organizations organizing in the Denver metro area and have won really successful policies passed to protect themselves. Things like ensuring that they don't have racist deactivization of their accounts. But beyond that, I think for DSA and how we orient ourselves to this, we really have to show actual solidarity and show up in these spaces and organize alongside these workers, not on behalf of them, and approach that work with a lot more humility and expand our horizons of our organizing to ensure that the issues that many communities of colors face, like racism, imperialism, immigration control, and policing, are equally important areas of radicalization and organizing as economic issues. And just merely adopting, like I said already, merely adopting these organizing frameworks is not enough. We must be organizing directly alongside the communities that are most impacted by these systems of oppression.
The third question is, an amendment advanced to convention called Tenants and Workers Together 2028 would integrate tenant power into the May Day 2028 proposal. What's your view on how we should interact with forces outside of labor in preparing for May Day 2028? First goes to Sarah.
A general strike will not work if it's just a single day, if it's just a symbolic measure. Socialists need to be building up a broad movement tying together socialist movements, social movement, the radical left flank of electoral organizing, and labor into a single unified project. If we don't do this in groups like DSA, no one else really will. We've seen again and again that the semi-spontaneous social upsurges or single powerful strikes dissipate without an organization and collective cohesion of the working class to channel them. For socialists in the labor movement, we have to aim to be the connective thread between the wider social struggle for queer liberation, Black liberation, immigrant rights, and anti-imperialism with the sort of bread and butter demands many unions will put forward. May Day 2028 can only work if it is a political economic movement, not merely an economic one. My union, for example, can't join in a general strike. That's because we're banned from striking full stop. It's illegal for us to do it. And this is the case either de facto or legally for so many workers across the country. In the case of many tenants, they are effectively barred from going on any strike or taking part in labor action because their rent is due the next month. So the socialist movement has to take the opportunity to raise the consciousness of workers across the board, agitating amongst our union to fight for workers who are less able to fight for themselves, and agitating amongst workers who may be organized in spaces other than union to understand that the power of the labor movement is a tool which can fight for their collective liberation. I think it's important that we remember, though, as valuable as tenant organizing is, oh shucks, I have to wrap up. Okay, we must make sure to orient towards the organized working class because they have a unique power. Thank you.
Alejandra, you're next.
I think it's really important for us to remember that we as working class folks, and we're talking about and other working class folks besides us, like there's no need to infantilize them. Like people get radicalized through real life experience, and we're seeing incredible organizing happening around tenant issues with some comrades in Boston, in New York, everywhere in the Midwest because of this. And I think it's important to remember that we as working class people can get radicalized through different moments, whether it's in the workplace or it's housing injustice. So the importance of DSA being really interconnected and supporting each other is super important. We're actually seeing this in Phoenix as well with some of our DSA comrades who are working in unison with another organization that is fighting to push for eviction protections at the city council. So all this to say is understanding that our connection and our relationships with other people is an incredible way for us to continue to bring people into our organization, to build them up as leaders, build them up as socialists, and ensure that they understand that whether it's housing, whether it's, work exploitation, whether it's climate, whatever issue it is 100% intersected with class. So it is absolutely important for us as DSA to be right there with them. And we're seeing it here in LA too, with the fight with tenants as well.
Thank you so much. Next, we have
To prepare for 2028, we got to be really laser focused on what our goal is. And for me, I think that our goal should be building a mass working class party that's capable of ending the genocide in Palestine. And the way that we're going to do that is by winning an arms embargo. And so in order for us to build up the political power that we need to win an arms embargo, we have to view 2028 as a time to be able to unite working class people across many different terrains around a common minimal program. The program that we suggest in Carnation is the following: Medicare for all, bringing down the cost of living, ending political corruption, unions for all, and ending US militarism. There's a lot of discussion within DSA often around building power, but we often don't say what that power is being built for. By having a minimal program, we'll be able to organize across all these different terrains of struggle with really clear, specific goals that all of these different organizations can tack onto. We also have to be clear and honest with ourselves about what a general strike in 2028 could achieve, even if it were engaged in a mass way across many different unions. In the past, labor organizers have actually been able to win an arms embargo against the Contras in Nicaragua through the Neighbor to Neighbor campaign, and it didn't involve a general strike. It happened through political organizing by union members applying the same principles that they've used to win in their unions to win in politics. And by taking that strategy and taking the approach of building lasting power, they were able to win an arms embargo. Thank you.
All right, we have Andrew next.
I think there's some really exciting organizing that happens outside of like traditionally non-organized sectors and workers, like specific labor organizing through tenant unions. Like I mentioned before, one of the most militant unions in the Denver metro area is the Colorado Independent Drivers Union, which is not, they've primarily been self-organized to push for their demands. I think we should definitely be looking towards building a broad coalition amongst different socialist organizations in the United States, labor organizations, and then deeply rooted community organizations to build a broad coalition to fight for the collectively demands we have for a better world. I think it would also behoove us to explore strategies for mobilization of non-unionized workforces and workers in informal economies through a strike framework, similar to actions that have happened like the Day Without Immigrants, which has mobilized large groups of people and saw themselves in the movement, as well as ensuring that we keep our orientation to organizing for political demands that serve us all, whether it be Medicare for all and arms embargo and things of that nature.
Thank you so much. Adithya?
Yeah, with regards to the particular amendment, I'm definitely supportive of some of the proposals in there, and if it passes, I look forward to helping implement it both through the GDC and the NPC. I've heard tenant organizer comrades in other chapters and my own express the lack of a political center, political organizational home as an impediment to tenant organizing and helping build up strong independent tenant unions. There's definitely a lot to learn from socialists internationally on this, but also in our own nation's history with the Communist Party, especially in the 20s and 30s. I think DSA should strive to be that political center in labor and tenant work. In labor, I think something like TUEL, TUEL, is a horizon that EWOC should strive for, and we should also expand our involvement with ETOC, ETOC. DSA's place in labor and tenant organizing should be on the front lines, leading union drives among the unorganized, continue to help build worker organizations outside the NLRA context in non-traditional industries, and continuing to grow the tenant movement in working class neighborhoods across the country. We should work within and alongside, the unions and worker centers that exist now, especially orgs on the leading edge, like the LA Tenants Union. But building the party is necessary to unite these struggles together and ensure that we move past a depoliticized economistic horizon. So to that extent, our labor and tenant organizing work should also prioritize building DSA.
Thank you so much. All right, we have Cliff next.
We are not going to defeat a ruling class that is organized to scientific precision, armed to the teeth, and wealthier than God by lining up our forces on the battlefield and yelling fire at will. The class war is a guerrilla war. We win by opening as many fronts as possible and rallying the people to our cause. This strategy is not focused on winning individual battles, but using them to advance our position slowly and surely until our enemy is bled dry. Do I want tenants to join us on May Day? Absolutely. I want workers, tenants, students, soldiers. I want your mother and your father. I want everybody out there for May Day 28. I will be voting yes on this amendment. I'll go a step further if I'm elected to the NPC. I want to push our chapter liaisons to facilitate organizer exchanges between chapters. In Orlando, for instance, almost none of our active members were around the last time we did tenant work. But when we go into our community, we hear grievances all the time from mostly Section 8 tenants. Imagine how much better prepared we'd be for May Day 28 if some hardcore tenant organizers were flown down from New York City to crash at my house for a couple weeks and help us build out a tenant program. The great general strikes that rocked Europe in the 20th century and helped build the socialist movement emanated from the workplace, but became a society-wide cultural phenomenon. DSA has got to do everything in its power to bring back that energy with a vengeance.
Thank you so much. Josh, you're next.
Yeah, I think this is a question about what we are trying to do overall with our movement. I mean, the goal is to build a multifaceted movement that can wield its power to demand improvements to life beyond just the relationships to employers who hold CBAs. I mean, housing is a labor issue. War, international relations, it's a labor issue. Education is a labor issue. The way that our political system responds, or in our case does not respond, to the demands of everyday people is a labor issue. The only way a massive coordinated action like this could occur and be effective is if each rank and file worker understands the power they hold to improve lives outside of just the workplace. And if we work to break down the idea forced upon us from birth here, that in order for us to succeed in one place, someone else must fail in another. I mean, listen, maybe I'm just restating class consciousness and I'm not giving a unique answer to the question, but that's what this is. I'm inspired to say that compared to even when I graduated college, all that time ago, back in 2020, it's something that I see as so much more inspiring today. So it's not just about including housing tenants, tenants' rights advocates, and tenants in our events or mobilizing each group to support one another. It's about continuous solidarity and coordination with one another, building a vision for the future together from the start, not just at the end. That's
Thank you. Cerena, you're next.
Okay, before I get started, this is all good.
At least for now. Try it.
Okay, awesome. So it will take organizing on every level of society to meet the level of disruption that we expect on May Day 2028. I believe that workers organizing collectively as workers withholding our labor will be highly effective at gumming up the fears of capital. And that is where I personally will be putting the majority of my effort in the coming years. But I agree with my comrades behind this amendment that we need more than just labor to confront capital. We need tenant organizers, we need organizers working toward the end of Israeli occupation of Palestine, queer and trans organizers defending bodily autonomy in this fight to make a truly disruptive May Day 2028 action.
Thank you. Next up, we have David.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's of the utmost importance that we integrate our strategy with other organized aspects of the working class. This amendment, Tenants and Workers Together, for example, is especially appealing to me as a tenant organizer. One of the reasons I became so committed to tenant organizing was understanding its potential to rebuild the connective tissue and social bonds in our communities while building networks of power and solidarity. I would say, housing resilient workers are better positioned to take risks in their workplace. Similarly, workers supported by networks of pantries, solidarity, community defense, and more are better positioned to bring the whole system to a halt, the kind of logistics and community building that we'll need to actually pull off a real general strike. And similarly, R37, Building a United Front toward 2028, lays out a pretty broad strategy for how we can prepare across diverse organizations, electoral battles, and social movements to ensure that 2028 is a pivotal year for the working class. A general strike on May Day 2028 must not be merely to combat capitalist greed for the benefit of those unionized workers whose contracts align with May 1st. It must be a defining moment to defend immigrants, the disabled, bodily autonomy, truly address the climate crisis, and lay a death blow to white supremacy and the imperial world order. Therefore, it must include and be organized with the broadest range of social movements as possible to actually be effective. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, David. I'll pass back to Dan for the last question.
Yes, the current labor consensus resolution proposed by the National Labor Commission would essentially maintain DSA's current labor strategy. However, an amendment proposed by MUG and R&R members called a Partyist labor strategy advocates for a more structured and politicized approach to DSA's labor work and the implementation of the rank and file strategy. So our question for our candidates is, do you support the amendment? And whether you do or do not, what is your plan for DSA to accelerate the rank and file strategy? And we're going to go to Cerena first.
So I would like to just reiterate my response for the first question. Again, I agree with my MUG and R&R comrades on the necessity of politicizing our work as socialist rank and file activists, and especially as working people have long been left behind by both Democratic and Republican parties and need a political home. And I think DSA is the political home for working people. But on politicization, I think, again, there are no shortcuts, as Cliff said, to merging the socialist and labor movements. And that is also, to reiterate, there is also no substitute to building trust among our coworkers. And sometimes that might mean working with some coworkers who will disagree with us politically on a lot of things. And I do encounter that on the shop floor as a nurse. But at the end of the day, we do have shared class interests. And it's our job to, while building trust with our coworkers, also work to build towards an environment where that class consciousness can arise. So I will be voting no on this amendment, but welcome to hear more from all of y'all on this amendment.
Okay, Adithya.
Yeah, I'll be frank. I don't think we should frame this question as DSA should be accelerating the rank and file strategy. I think we've seen real limitations to the rank and file strategy, especially with struggles in UAWD and TDU in recent years. The rank and file strategy, as originally defined, is really intentionally depoliticized and trying to build militancy outside the structure of a socialist organization, which I don't think really reflects our current labor environment. I think it's also a bit of a political totem within DSA that people use vaguely to try and claim a bunch of different things. Really, what I think we should be doing, prioritizing the importance of new organizing to actually reverse low union density locally, that can look like continuing to build up stronger integration between chapters and local EWOC branches, helping chapters build out local salting programs. I think the amendment takes some positive steps to politicizing our labor work. I also think would love to see and help support the NLC with helping build up more chapter formations and improving chapters' ability to cohere labor work on the local level. I know there's some chapters that do a really good job of this. Like there's definitely uneven development across DSA, like with many areas of work. But I know locally and on other chapters, I've seen our labor working groups have issues with taking on shared projects or really bringing in non-unionized members. And sometimes it falls into the pattern of mostly unionized workers deeply embedded in their own local struggles and not able to find work that they can take on beyond being like a local workers council. And again, I would really love to see us continue to work on developing outer strategies with new organizing.
Okay, Cliff.
Among socialists in the labor movement, there's two dominant trends. There's an economist right wing, which defers to union leadership on political questions and sticks to bread and butter demands, and a sectarian left wing, which defines itself purely in opposition to leadership without offering a positive alternative vision. We need to build a socialist center for our unions. The Partyist labor strategy amendment will help us do exactly that by calling on DSA members to connect our shop floor demands to our political platform and mandating the National Labor Commission to carry out two crucial tasks: forming industrial sections for DSA members in the same industry to coordinate their labor work, and developing sample resolutions for DSA members to make political interventions against union leadership's ongoing fascist collaboration for our socialist vision. The NLC must take an active role in helping DSA members collectively decide how to intervene in workplace struggles rather than leaving it up to the initiative of individuals. Our influence is powerful. DSA members help secure critical labor endorsements for Zoran. If our workplace interventions for immigrant protections and arms embargoes and Mayday 28 become as coordinated as our electoral interventions, the merger of DSA and the labor movement will be inevitable. As a member of Marxist Unity Group, I am proud to support this amendment. Thanks.
Okay, and David.
Yeah, so I think that the NLC consensus resolution does a good job laying out the broad strategy of our organizing, rank file, new organizing, but I do really appreciate the amendment's attention to the politicization of our labor work and committing us to an orientation less likely to be co-opted for economistic gains, while also not banishing ourselves to self-righteous sidelines within existing organized labor. So I appreciate the amendment. I also think it introduces important structures and political groundings to guide our work and expanding new organizing, which I think is great. But we also recognize that the traditional party form is a useful but potentially inadequate response to the emergent and immediate social needs of workers and movement strategy. I think a broader vision of social organization that reflects on defeats and the limitations of the electoral road and the current iterations of the rank and file strategy is necessary. In general, we believe DSA members should not hide their affiliation within the socialist movement during the course of their work with the unions, nor should they allow their politics to passively fall by the wayside. Socialist labor organizers should openly identify themselves as such and advocate earnestly for democratic, militant unions, but we must be careful not to subordinate union activity to DSA's other political priorities or take a hostile or sectarian approach toward existing reform movements. We must distinguish ourselves, not by separating ourselves from our coworkers or from sections of labor that may not identify as socialist, but through our contributions to workplace struggles and our commitment to democracy, working class militancy, open dialogue, and solidarity. Thanks.
Sarah?
Well, I do support this. I helped write this resolution, and I have two things I wanted to show y'all to explain it. The first is this book. It's by a guy named Lenin, and it's called What Is to Be Done. And in it, he talks about the necessity of workers and socialists organizing and talking publicly about their socialist ideas. He says we have to be clear about what we believe because we need to work to raise the horizons of workers, to help them to understand their interests as a class. And this is a vial of estrogen. I'm a transgender woman, and my life kind of depends on this. I pay for it with my union dues. I have union healthcare. And without it, I don't know what I'd do. Now, a lot of times when people see books like this bandied about, they jump to the conclusion that we're just outside academics who want to bring our big fancy ideas and lecture workers. But I believe in this idea of a Marxist labor strategy, one that seeks to convince people of ideas they aren't yet convinced of, because my rights, my healthcare, are one of those ideas they aren't yet convinced of. My rights are something that consciousness has to be raised on. In my own union, I've run into people being transphobic, and thank goodness my reform caucus didn't back down. They didn't say, oh, well, maybe people will figure it out sometime. They stood up for me. They organized for my rights, and they helped talk to people who had never heard about trans rights before and convinced them. That's what we socialists need to try to do across the board for interests that workers or unions have not yet been convinced of, but can be convinced of. We need to be fighting for socialist consciousness within the labor movement because socialist consciousness represents the interests of oppressed workers like me and oppressed people all across the world. So in between the high theoretical ideas and the immediate struggles and suffering of individual workers is an opportunity for politicization on a working class socialist basis. If we pass this resolution, we can help commit to socialist politics in the labor movement, not by abandoning our commitment to workers, but by helping them understand that our struggle is shared and that it is a class struggle.
Okay, Josh.
Hey, comrades. So first, yes, I do support this resolution. I think it offers a vision we can use as a framework to build towards a wider labor movement and empower everyday workers with the words and ideas that can give shape to a new political framework. Our rank and file strategy must go beyond just building collective bargaining structures to take on the bosses. I work in a shop building scenery for Broadway. By the way, just marched on the bosses yesterday. Wahoo! But if there is a more business-friendly organizing market than Broadway, I would love, or hate, I suppose, to hear about it. I've seen what happens when locals or unions are friends with the bosses and lack a wider socialist class consciousness. I mean, for God's sakes, the owners of my shop are allowed to remain in the union. So when we talk with experienced union members who came into this up in this organizing situation, you know what they cared about above all else? The boss's feelings. And when they heard about the organizing, their first thought was to wait for the bosses to give us a union on their own. I mean, if I could swear, what the fuck? If not, edit that out. I can only imagine how many of you are groaning hearing all that. And you know who else isn't inspired by that? My fellow workers, especially young ones. Most of them are hungry to have a union that'll fight for them, uncaring of the boss's feelings. Some of our coworkers were previously in unions and were heartbroken by their inaction. A union organized around the revolutionary and socialist principles that have guided their foundation can feed that desire in them. We do have to build workers' trust, and we can't do that if we can't connect them to a clearly different world vision that will provide for all aspects of our lives. By connecting our demands in the workplace with a democratically determined political vision, we can begin the process of intertwining the labor movement and the socialist one. Thank you.
So just to state off the bat, Groundworks has not taken a formal position on the amendment, but we are friendly to politicizing, generally friendly to politicizing our work in the labor movement. And we understand that we need to move towards a strategy that goes beyond bread and butter contract issues and start addressing the larger social issues like immigration, like housing, environment, etc., in labor work as socialists. And this is why models like bargaining for the common good, for example, are super important. And like advocating for political education in our unions is super important. We also need to make sure that we're not simply just fighting for union reform or union democracy and strong contracts, but we need to be moving our unions left. And we also, for anyone, it sounds like a lot of us, for example, have already like organized our workplace, which is incredible. And we know how incredibly difficult that is when you have a lot of the majority, I would argue, having done it 3 times with my coworkers, the majority of people are somewhere in the middle, even within their own workplace. When it comes to organizing, and the Teamsters and Sean O'Brien, for example, that are like setting themselves up to align with Trump is an example of us failing to meet a moment of moving unions, to the left when we have advocated for union reform. So again, Groundwork does not have an official position, but we will be looking into it. Thank you.
Okay, and Abdullah.
Yeah, I share a lot of the motivation for this amendment in terms of, really taking a more structured and political approach to our labor work. But I think that this amendment lacks a clear through line and a set of clear goals for DSA members in the labor movement. In particular, I think that resolving to condemn union leadership publicly or to enlist the NLC to be openly critical of union leadership doesn't bring us any closer to moving unions towards our politics. In my organizing with the Mask Off Maersk campaign, I've been incredibly impressed by the discipline of Palestinian youth movement organizers in not putting out public statements against key logistics unions that facilitate the movement of arms to arm the genocide by sea. These organizers instead took the opposite approach and targeted Maersk, which is the largest maritime shipper of weapons and also a common enemy of maritime logistics workers because of its role in driving forward automation. One PYM chapter even put on an event with logistics workers called War and Automation to concretely connect the two struggles. The rank and file tactic needs a corresponding strategy. In terms of what we've put forward, we believe that we need to identify short and medium strategic goals for our union organizing and identify common targets like Maersk between unions and DSA members. These strategic goals should include building support for DSA's minimal program in our unions, along with building support for DSA candidates in our unions. Those goals can then be supported by DSA members engaged in the rank and file tactic, along with union staffers, leaders, and DSA members who aren't in unions, who can organize for common goals with union members in their DSA chapters. Thank you.
And Andrew.
I think there's a lot to like in the amendment. For me personally, I like the increased focus on union membership democracy, and with things like the right of members having the ability to control the political endorsement of their unions. As a former member of the Colorado State Employees Union, that is a frustration we continually had, that many members who I had shared a role in radicalizing them as a part of our political committee were frustrated with the fact that we didn't have a direct say in who our union chose to endorse, and often we just openly endorsed any and all Democrat, and usually just provided a little less money to the Democrats who had voted against legislation that in things that like in increased budget in bringing back step raises for state employees. People that voted against, Democrats that voted against that, we would usually still endorse them. Outside of that, I really like the portions that seek to compile contracts, stewards training, stuff like that, that I think that'd be incredibly helpful for local EWOC formations, which my chapter Denver DSA, I'm thankful for, had a role in helping my partner who helps victims of sexual assault. She was able, as a survivor, to organize her union, because understanding that sexual assault survivors should be able to make ends meet themselves. And my chapter was able to help her organize her workplace. But one of the things that we lacked is providing her with resources, steward trainings, contracts, things of that nature, that would have made her organizing process so much easier. And I do believe really strongly in the local EWOC formation, and I really love the portions of the amendment that try to seek to build a bridge between the national NLC and local NLC, or in local labor committees, to develop labor organizing more strongly as a formation within local chapters, and supporting the development of local EWOCs, which I know my chapter has had success for. I've seen it personally, as well as multiple other organizing campaigns that our chapter has taken on to improve the lives of workers, which in turn results in more people learning about DSA in our local community, and coming back to DSA to help forward that organizing work, with the understanding that it's part of our shared vision.
We are behind our time, so we didn't really have audience questions as we went. We did advertise this is going from 9 to 10:30 Eastern. So we are going to just close us out. Sorry that we didn't have time for audience questions. But we want to, thank everyone who is here. Our mission is to bring, the labor movement and DSA together, to critically think about labor and engage in these discussions. Hopefully this is a resource to see where some of these caucuses stand. Labor organizing, super important to the development of the socialist movement in the US and the world. And so for more, we encourage you to subscribe to Working Mass. Visit our website, working-mass.org, and in print when you subscribe. So until next time, thank you to all of our panelists and audience for joining us.